Marnie's Grimmsnarl and Steven's Metagross EX have hit the battlefield in Japan, and although we won't get the English release of these decks and cards until May, today we're going to look at the first iterations of deck lists performing at City League events for both Steven's Metagross EX and Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX. Similar to the Rival Battle decks we'll get alongside the Destined Rivals set release for English, Japan released these cards in their own theme decks. Let's begin by reviewing the Marnie's cards first. So we've got a Marnie's Purloin here, a basic Pokemon that can hit a EX Pokemon for 60 damage for just a Dark Energy, not too bad. And then that evolves into Marnie's Liepard, which has a similar attack, swinging 140 into a Pokemon EX for 2 Dark Energies. These kind of just look like filler cards, along with the Marnie's Scraggy with a Crunch attack, and also Marnie's Scrafty, which just has some pretty vanilla attacks as well. Then we go into the Grimmsnarl line. So we have Marnie's Impidimp. It has a Filch attack that can draw a card. Nothing else too crazy. Marnie's Morgrim with a Corkscrew Punch attack. So we're seeing pretty vanilla basic and stage 1 forms here. But then we get up into Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX. And this card is literally a monster. Grimmsnarl is such a cool looking Pokemon. I love this Pokemon, but it also has a lot of crazy effects going for it. So it has 320 health, which is great. And it has the ability, which is translated as Punk Up. And looks like that's going to be the English translation as well. You may use this ability when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon. Search your deck for up to 5 basic Dark Energy cards and attach them to your Marnie's Pokemon in any way you like. And then Marnie's Grimmsnarl has the attack Shadow Bullet. It does 180 for 2 Dark, and then it also does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So the glaring issue is that this gets to accelerate a lot of energy. So think like Charizard EX's Infernal Rain, but 5 basic Dark Energy. But you're restricted to only attaching them to Marnie's Pokemon. And so far out of the Pokemon we've looked at, Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX is really the only Marnie's Pokemon I'd want to be attaching these energies to. So maybe you could set up multiple Marnie's Grimmsnarl EXs and switch between them and force your opponent to boss them up to finish out the KO, or maybe you can Toro them up when they get hit and just keep sending out the next Marnie's Grimmsnarl. But there is one more Marnie's card to look at, and that's Marnie's Morpeko with the Spiked Wheels attack, which for 3 colorless energy does 20 damage plus 40 more damage for each Dark Energy attached to this Pokemon. So if you were to just send all 5 of those energies over to Marnie's Morpeko, you would have a 70 HP single prizer that's swinging for 220 damage if you put all 5 of those Dark Energies on it. So this Marnie's Morpeko can do some serious damage. It'll be pretty good for knocking out like basic EXs, or even like stage 2 non-EXs, or cleaning up a knockout on something else. So the Marnie's Morpeko is pretty cool, although it does have very low HP. There's one final card for support that comes in this deck, which is the Spikemuth Gym. Once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a Marnie's Pokemon and put it into their hand. So pretty cool stadium card, allowing you to search your deck for a Marnie's Pokemon. That'll help you get your Marnie's Grimmsnarl a lot easier, maybe get your basic Pokemon as well that you need to get onto the board, like the Marnie's Impidimp. Very unimpressed by the extra Marnie's Pokemon, the Liepard line and the Scraggy line, but I'll EX deck lists right after we look at the Steven's Metagross deck and all of the cards that come in that. So I'm actually much more impressed with the Steven's cards that come to support the Metagross. So we'll start out here with Steven's Baltoy that has the Gathering Signal attack. Search your deck for up to 2 basic Steven's Pokemon and put them onto your bench. So that's really good. If you go second and you start with this Baltoy, you can, kind of call for family here, get 2 Steven's Baltoys or whatever else you might need onto your bench. And then Steven's Baltoy, of course, evolves into Steven's Claydol. And Steven's Claydol has the Clay Blast attack that does 220 damage, discard all energy from this Pokemon. Notably, you could use like a reversal energy for this, but just like Marnie's Grimmsnarl, Steven's Metagross is going to accelerate energy, so we'll get to that in a moment, but I do think Clay Blast is a nice shout here since it evolves from Steven's Baltoy that has the Call for Family style attack, And then it has this 220 attack that you could just use reversal energy, which is a single energy attachment. But like I said, we'll get to the Metagross in a moment, and that also accelerates energy. Next, we have Steven's Carbink. As long as this Pokemon is on the bench, each of your Steven's Pokemon take 30 less damage from your opponent's attacks. This effect does not stack. So keep that in mind. Your Steven's Metagross will be taking 30 less damage. Then we also have Steven's Skarmory, and like I said, the Steven's Pokemon that they include in the deck just really outshine the Marnie's Pokemon, in my opinion, because now we have Steven's Skarmory. Obviously, some more filler. You know, they're throwing in these common Pokemon cards into the deck to give you some more Steven's Pokemon to fill out the theme decks, but they have usable attacks. Steven's Skarmory has Sonic Double. This attack does 50 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. I can definitely see an instance where, you know, there's 2 Pokemon on your opponent's board, maybe they're active, and one of their bench Pokemon that are 50 damage or less from being knocked out, and Steven's Skarmory can fill that utility that you need to spread damage out between 2 Pokemon. So although it's not a fantastic card, it still has situations where it's usable, and those are the kind of things I look at for these theme decks, and also for just the archetypes that are almost pre-built, right? Like, you can't put too many other Pokemon into a Steven's deck if you're trying to have all of your Pokemon synergize with each other, so you got to use what the designers are giving us. And then before we look at Steven's Metagross, just real quick, there's also the Granite Cave Stadium. Steven's Pokemons take 30 less damage from attacks from the opponent's Pokemon, so that means if you have the Steven's Carbink and the Granite Cave, your Steven's Pokemon are taking 60 less damage from attacks. Now let's take a look at the Metagross line. Beldum is very vanilla. It just has a ram attack that does 30. Steven's Metang, Metal Slash 70, very vanilla. It's a shame that we can't use the good Metang, but it's not a Steven's Metang, so you gotta use the Steven's Metang. And then Steven's Metagross EX. It has the ability X Boot. You may use this ability once during your turn, search your deck for up to 1 basic Psychic and up to 1 basic Metal Energy, and attach them to your Psychic and Metal Energy in any way you like. So remember, I was saying they gave Steven's Metagross better support Steven's Pokemon than they gave to Grimmsnarl, but you don't even have to use Steven's Metagross EX specifically with Steven's Pokemon. You just need to use it with Psychic and Metal Pokemon. So they also gave Steven's Metagross EX a lot more wiggle room to work with other cards in the game. So you get to accelerate up to 2 basic energies. It has to be a Psychic and a Metal, or just 1 Psychic or 1 Metal. It can't be 2 Psychic or 2 Metal. So 1 Psychic, 1 Metal, and attach them to your Psychic and Metal Pokemon in any way you like. So this could be used specifically to accelerate energy to Metal Pokemon, specifically to Psychic Pokemon, or you could have a deck with both types in them. Then it has the Metal Stomp attack for 200. But remember, Metal Stomp attack is not very impressive. The ability is very impressive. And if we have Carbink and Granite Cave, Steven's Metagross, if we're going to be using it as our attacker, is taking 60 less damage from attacks. So essentially, your opponent will need to do 400 damage to one-shot a Steven's Metagross if you have those extra buffs on the board. Now we're going to take a look at some deck lists. We'll start out with Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX deck lists. And the highest placing Marnie's Grimmsnarl deck at a City League so far has been this 2nd place deck list. So here we have a deck that is going to be focused on Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX with a 4-2-3 line of Marnie's Grimmsnarl. And it also has 2 of the Marnie's Morpeko. So remember that the Morpeko does 40 more damage for each dark energy on it with a base of 20. And the Marnie's Grimmsnarl does 180 and then 30 to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. This deck is utilizing Badoo for the early turns while you get set up. And then once you get into Marnie's Grimmsnarl or Marnie's Morpeko as your attackers, you also have the added bonus of Pecharunt EX, synergizing with them since they are Dark type. So Pecharunt EX is subjugating chains, can send one of these Pokemon up into the active and poison them. And then you attach Binding Mochi. Now, because of the Binding Mochi, if you're poisoned, you're doing 40 more damage. So that Marnie's Morpeko, that maybe if it goes from 0 energy to 5 with the Marnie's Grimmsnarl ability, now you're doing 40 times 5, that's 200, plus the base of 20, so you're doing 220 damage. Maybe you also manually attach a dark energy. Now you're doing 260 damage, and then it's poisoned. Then you attach a Binding Mochi, that's 300 damage. Then let's say that you also have a Dark Energy on your Monkey Dory for Adrenabrain and you have damage on the board. You could do 300 plus that 30 from Adrenabrain. If we add that, that's 330 damage. So you do have some huge potential for one-shotting with Marnie's Morpeko. And then, of course, with Marnie's Grimmsnarl, if you use the Binding Mochi with that, it could do 220 plus 30 to a benched Pokemon as well. And the Monkey Dory works really well here because you're already using Dark Energy, and you can have more than enough of Energy Acceleration with the Marnie's Grimmsnarl EXs, so you'll often have an extra Energy attachment or an Energy Switch to just go ahead and toss it onto Monkey Dory if you need to. Here's one more Marnie's Grimmsnarl deck list. Now, that first one we looked at was a second place list, and I do think that's roughly the way to build Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX if you're looking for competitive success with specifically these Marnie's cards. This is a 16th place deck list, so drastically lower than the second place one, but we'll see a couple of different ideas going on here. They're really leaning more into the Monkey Dory with 3 Monkey Dories, but I would really like to see some energy switches in here so you can actually get energies from Marnie's Pokemon onto the Monkey Dories. I think that's really important. Again, they're using the Badoo. We'll also see that they're using a Technical Machine Devo, maybe because of the little bit of damage spread with the Grimmsnarl plus the Dory. So if you go like Grimmsnarl hits 30 on something, then next turn you Adrenabrain another 30 onto it, then you could Devo maybe. But like I said, this is a 16th place deck list. Just wanted to show a little bit of variety, but it does look like that second place list that we looked at really has the blueprints for how to build a Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX deck list. Now let's look at the highest placing Metagross deck from City Leagues. This is a 4th place deck list, and this one is super interesting and it's pretty intricate, so let's talk about it. So we have our 3-1-2 line of Steven's Metagross EX, but we also have what seems to be almost the Pokemon core of like a Noctowl Ogerpon deck. So we have 3 Lily's Clefairy EX, we have a 2-2 Noctowl line. Our Terra Pokemon, we just have 2 Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, although note that we are using 3 Area 0 Underdepths and the 2-2 line of Noctowl, which both interact with Terra Pokemon, so that Teal Mask Ogerpon is important to get onto our bench. Also using Precious Trolley as the A-spec of choice, so if we have the Area 0 and a Teal Mask, then we could just go Precious Trolley for like Hoot 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 Hoot, 2 Beldums, a Clefairy, Latias, Badoo, or maybe Fanrotom to get the Hoot Hoots and the Noctowls. Lots of potential for a huge bench of support Pokemon there. But it looks like our main attackers are going to be Lily's Clefairy EX and then possibly Steven's Metagross EX. So Lily's Clefairy EX, it's going to make the weakness of each Dragon Pokemon Psychic. So that's really great if you're playing against any Dragon Pokemon like Raging Bull or Dragapult EX. And then has the Full Moon Rondo attack, 20 damage plus 20 more for each benched Pokemon, which is an attack you should be familiar with if you've used Entei V or Raikou V or Suicune V. It's the same kind of Rondo attack, just on a different color of Pokemon. And Steven's Metagross EX with the X boot can accelerate 2 energies to Clefairy EX every single turn. And you can kind of treat Lily's Clefairy EX like a single prize Pokemon because of the Lily's Pearl tool. If the Lily's Pokemon this is attached to is knocked out by damage, that player takes 1 fewer prize card. So that's why Metagross goes so well with Lily's Clefairy here, because you're going to be using this Lily's Clefairy ideally as if it is a single prize Pokemon. So you'll attack with it with the Lily's Orb on it, it gets knocked out, your opponent only gets 1 prize. Now you have to establish another Lily's Clefairy, but that's no problem because Metagross EX can just search your deck and get those energy every single turn, as long as they're, in the deck. So this deck does play a Super Rod to be putting some of those energies back in as you need them. And then your other attacker, of course, Steven's Metagross, can swing for 200 damage with Metal Stomp. You can attack with other Pokemon. There's enough grass energy in here to use Teal Dance and to use Myriad Leaf Shower. But I think Teal Mask Ogerpon is more so here, potentially as a grass attacker to answer maybe Marnie's Grimmsnarl, maybe Charizard EX. but also here as just like the Terra bot. You know, you need a Terra Pokemon to use Noctowl, and you need a Terra Pokemon to use Area Zero. And then because of its Teal Dance, it also supplies some draw power. But also with the energy switches, you can energy switch and get that attack if you don't have a Metagross EX online. So the Teal Mask Ogerpun's utility here is definitely interesting, something I might have to look at more. But I do really like how this list is constructed, and like I said, it got 4th place, being the highest placing Stevens Metagross deck list yet. Here we have a 5th place Stevens Metagross EX deck list, and this one is utilizing 2 Monkey Dory to, you know, go along with the tankiness of Stevens Metagross a little bit more. And then it's running a 1/1 for Rigorath line with the Armor Tail ability that prevents all damage done to it by basic Pokemon EX. So it could be a wall that just like completely shuts down some decks that only have basic EXs as their attackers. Or maybe they have some other Pokemon that can attack, but they're not very good. And so for Rigorath EX just walls those kinds of things out. And then we have a 13th place Stevens Metagross EX here, and this one definitely looks more fun tier, if anything. Now, I know that this Slowking here would Seek Inspiration. Discard the top card of your deck, and if that card is a Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box, choose one of its attacks and use it as this attack. I know this card is actually like kind of a real deck. You know, you can put Kyurem on top, use Trifrost, and that's like most of the time what you're trying to do. You can also put Regigigas on top, use Jewel Breaker. So there are some pretty strong single prize Pokemon that copy the attacks of its Slowking, and then Stevens Metagross can just accelerate the energy to Slowking that it needs immediately. Just search the 1 Psychic 1 Metal. But based on this deck's placement of 13th, and then not seeing it anymore, this looks like a clunky and suboptimal way to choose to use either Stevens Metagross or Slowking. So I'm going to deem this as fun tier, probably shouldn't play it. So that's my entire review today for Stevens Metagross and Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX. Now, these cards have only been out for a couple of weeks in Japan, so they haven't had too much time to shine just yet. I don't think either of them are necessarily game-changing in either way, but it is cool to see these owners' Pokemon coming out and seeing the kind of synergies that they're trying to build out within them. And they both definitely have some cool things to experiment with. So whenever new cards come out and they're not just completely vanilla, like Stevens Metagross gives it a lot of range to use with a lot of different Pokemon. So its combinations with Lily's Clefairy EX are actually really cool. And then similar with Marnie's Grimmsnarl, it gives you the chance to accelerate energies to your Marnie's Pokemon. That gives you extra energy attachments to go ahead and use Adrenabrain. And also, the Marnie's Morpeko can do a lot of damage, like we were saying. So let me know what you think about this. Which one's your favorite, Marnie's Grimmsnarl or Stevens Metagross EX out of these two rival battle-themed decks? And subscribe to the channel for more Pokemon TCG content. You can check out my educational content in the description down below. I offer one-on-one coaching. I also have free articles on Substack, and I have a complete competitive Pokemon TCG masterclass, which you could find at my links in the description down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.